What up, friends? It's Ceaseless, and today we're going to be reviewing the newest album by The Smile, Wall of Eyes. Like I said before, this is the newest album by the English collaboration rock band The Smile. The Smile, of course, consists of Radiohead members Tom York and Johnny Greenwood, alongside Sons of Kemet drummer Tom Skinner. Despite being a bit of a newer Radiohead fan, the last album by The Smile surprised me. Though I am pretty unfamiliar with Sons of Kemet, to be honest, I really appreciated how you can hear the roots of the source band, if you will, on the previous album by The Smile. It takes their original sound, the sound that they, are pretty comfortable with, and kind of experiments with it and makes it its own thing. The previous record by the band was definitely varied, but it felt a bit unfocused at times too. It combined these upbeat and harder rock tracks alongside the ambient pop, more experimental side of Radiohead. It was still really good though, and this album kind of sees them streamlining the sound on the previous record even further. It also really leans more into that ambient pop side of the previous record too. While they kind of streamline it a bit too much in places, I think, it's still a very engaging listen, especially for the genre. The delicate opener, Wall of Eyes, the title track, is already a pretty strong start. It almost kind of reminds me of the moody and melodic moments of a Half Moon Run record or something. The delicate drums and acoustic guitar create a very ambient and ominous scene. It feels a bit haunting at times. The string segments also really add to this. One thing that The Smile are pretty good at, and it's exemplified in this track, I think, is their ability to create a good sense of progression and flow using fairly repetitive instrumentals. I'm also really liking how the lyrics make the instrumental feel a bit somber at times too. It was basically talking about how people feel walled off and, kind of enclosed in their own space and unwilling to or unable to actually express themselves freely out of fear of judgment and ridicule from other people. Telharmonic is arguably even more ambient than the previous track, creating a fairly dreamlike soundscape thanks to these sparse instruments and echoing vocals. In a way that's kind of this album's blessing and its curse. The songs here largely blend into each other very well, creating a pretty cohesive album-long experience. However, in doing so, they kind of sacrifice their individuality as well. It definitely makes the album sound better when listening to it as a whole rather than picking out individual tracks, and that just might not appeal to some people. And while it's largely not too much of a problem, it can also make some songs kind of feel in one ear out the other. However, I do really like how the instrumental steadily builds on this track, and I'm also really digging the bass introduction on this one. It gives the song a kind of a funky groove that does help it stand out a bit more. Now, I know I just talked about songs not really standing out too much, but the next song, Read the Room, definitely does, and it's definitely because of that guitar. In fact, I would actually say this is probably one of, if not the most Radiohead-esque song on the project, and it's also one of the best songs on the project too. It has a much more dire tone compared to some of the other songs on here, almost like it's pleading for its message to get across. The lyrics also reinforce this, as Tom is basically looking at this guy who is totally oblivious to how his actions are affecting others. He's just utterly bewildered by this, and in fact, the instrumental switch up in the last third of the track in a way kind of represents how his anger is just increasing and how he doesn't understand how someone could be so ignorant to their words affecting people. Under Our Pillows continues the catchy and off-kilter guitar portions of the previous track, however it's stretched out a bit more here. It's just as good, if not kinda stretching its runtime a little bit. The instrumental also largely continues the dire theming of the previous song, however arguably even more so as the pacing picks up in the second half. However, I also find it to be lyrically weaker and more vague compared to Read the Room, even if it's not too much of a big deal. The next song, Friend of a Friend, definitely slows it down a bit. It's a piano ballad with a groove, something that sounds very natural for these guys while also making it stand out in the context of this project. The horn segments create a very dramatic sound, further sort of creating this dreamlike atmosphere that permeates the song. I think this is also expressed in the lyrics, again talking about how people kind of build up walls to make themselves palatable to the general public. It seems to express sleepwalking through your own life, not being able to express yourself how you want to. In a way, you're almost kind of fantasizing about how you would be if it weren't for the judgment of others, and I think the addition of the string segments also kind of express this sadness too. I Quit continues the piano focus while also combining it with the acoustic guitar present earlier in the record. The strings and synths are pretty nice, however, I find this song to be less engaging vocally. Funnily enough, despite its runtime, it almost feels more like an intermission track at times. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it does feel like it kind of meanders around without a set goal or destination. Bending Hectic is definitely the longest track on the project, however, it also kind of has the same problems as the previous one. Don't get me wrong, the instrumental is ethereal and elegant, but it feels a bit too long for what's actually happening in it. The vocals are very pleasant though and add to the delicate nature of the track nicely. The explosive finale is also very well done, especially lyrically, as Tom basically is experiencing a car crash or car scare in slow motion and he's finally realizing what's happening to him. I just wish there was a bit less filler in the time it takes to actually reach that finale. Or at least having a more steady build-up with more instruments being added as the track progresses or something. You Know Me is a pretty fitting closing track to the record, combining a lot of the ethereal and haunting elements of the previous songs into one here. I also appreciate how this song kind of feels like the calmness after the storm that is Bending Hectic, or at least the ending of Bending Hectic. It's quiet and introspective instead, and it's fit with lyrics basically talking about how Tom needs to believe in himself and how only he knows himself best. It's a bit sparse instrumentally compared to what I usually like, but for this context, I think it works really well. I'm also really digging how it does build, but it almost builds to like an anti-chorus, or it builds to like emptiness, which I think is a pretty neat spin on the traditional structure. In fact, the instrumental kind of just cuts out after the chorus, which I think has a pretty cool effect. Overall, this newest album by The Smile was a pretty interesting progression from the last one. I like how they honed in on one aspect of the previous record and just took it further. In doing so, they definitely made the album feel more cohesive than the last one did. However, it also kind of lacks the track-by-track identity that the last one had. It's a double-edged sword, but all in all, I think I like this album about the same as the last one, just for different reasons. This is one of those records where listening to it front to back is best. While there are standout tracks that can basically stand on their own, it hits better when you listen to it in the full context of the record. All that being said, I am feeling a strong 7 on the newest album by The Smile. Of course, we also take a look at album covers on this show, and I like this one quite a bit. It's very similar to the last album by The Smile in that they're both very abstract, they're both kind of esoteric, and they fit the whole like dream-like atmosphere, I suppose, that both albums are kind of going for at times. I suppose it does fit this one a little bit more just because it is a bit more ambient, and however, it does have that red coloration to it too, which I think is pretty cool because it does have that sort of like hidden bite to it that some of these songs have, so I think it's a pretty good album cover, if nothing, totally crazy. But those are just my thoughts on this newest album by The Smile. What did you guys think? Do you like this one even more so than the last one? They just hone in their sound even further? Or are you kind of feeling that it's kind of overall the same? Let me know. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell, and I won't put walls around myself. And until the next one, farewell.